Galactic Smith called it impossible. The human apprentice smiled. It's just Damascus my uncle made. Alien Forgemaster Grawnok called it impossible steel. Maya called it her uncle's work. The great alien forge complex towered over Maya Shan like a mountain of metal and plasma. Rivers of controlled fire ran through conduits overhead. The main furnace burned a deep electric blue, bathing her human skin in ghostly light as she stood at the center of the grand forge. At 5 feet 7 inches, Maya was painfully aware of how small she looked in front of the Torian Forgemaster. Grawnok of Taeti stood close to 9 feet tall. 4 corded arms folded over a broad chest, his metallic skin reflecting the flames like brushed steel. Ritual scars, deep, straight gouges that marked centuries of mastery, ran across his shoulders and along his jaw. Hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss our latest uploads. His 3 pupils in each yellow eye narrowed as he turned the blade in his hands. Impossible, he rumbled. The word rolled through the forge chamber like thunder. Whatever conversation the other alien apprentices had been having died instantly. Dozens of eyes, tendrils, and crystalline facets turned toward the human and the strange patterned sword she had brought. This structure contradicts established metallurgical laws, Grawnok went on. His voice vibrated in Maya's bones. The strength readings exceed what a heterogeneous matrix should support. No known Torian alloy behaves like this. He ran a thick gray finger along the rippling pattern, tracing the flowing waves frozen in metal. Maya didn't flinch. She'd been expecting this moment. Is there a fault in your scanners? One Aldari student asked, light flickering across their crystalline arms. Negative, Grawnok snapped. I have recalibrated 3 times. The lattice is chaotic yet stable. He looked down at Maya, towering over her. Explain this, human Shan. Maya felt heat from the plasma furnace behind her, but the warmth that spread through her chest came from somewhere else. From summers spent in a small workshop on Earth, from the steady rhythm of hammer blows and the soft rasp of her uncle's voice. She smiled. Damascus, she said quietly. My uncle makes it. A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. Damascus? For most of them, it was just another Earth proper noun. Grawnok did not look satisfied. You claim a single human craftsman fabricated this? He pressed. You? Or your so-called uncle? We forged it together, Maya replied. Her voice stayed calm. The pattern you see is what humans call Damascus steel. Layered, folded, and forged by hand. It's not impossible steel, Master Forgemaster. It's very old steel. The murmur grew louder. Humans had joined the Galactic Union less than 20 years ago. They still sat at the bottom of the technological hierarchy, curious newcomers with primitive bodies and surprisingly stubborn minds. The Forge Academy of Taeti had accepted exactly 1 human, mostly so the Union could say they were being inclusive. That human was standing here, challenging one of the most respected metallurgists in the galaxy. Grawnok stared at her for a long moment, then shifted his gaze back to the blade. Begin, he ordered. The automated test rigs moved into place around the sword, slender articulated arms bristling with sensors. A pressurization frame clamped the blade and pulled. Screen after screen filled with readings, tensile strength, stress distribution, microfracture propagation. The other students' creations had already gone through this gauntlet. Uniform silver Torian alloys, prismatic Aldari lattice blades, gravity-balanced Ceritin cutters. All impressive. All textbook perfect. Maya's blade was not uniform. Its surface shimmered with layered waves like what grain trapped in metal. The rig pushed the tempered edge through varying materials, simulated bone, synthetic armor, composite hull plating, measuring cut depth, force, and deformation. Cutting efficiency within optimal Torian parameters, one console reported. Impact resilience anomalously high. Rerunning, said another. The third run matched the second. Under heavy impact, the Damascus blade flexed, absorbed, and recovered. Other blades had fractured. A few had shattered outright. The molecular scan came last. An Aldari instructor leaned forward, crystalline arms glowing as data scrolled across his display. "This cannot be correct," he said. "Report," Grawnok demanded. "The lattice is not homogeneous," the Aldari replied. "It contains layered zones of differing carbon densities and microstructures. By all current models, this arrangement should create weakness lines. Yet force distribution appears diffused. Fractures die before propagating." Grawnok's 3 pupils contracted. "Impossible," he repeated. Maya felt a flash of déjà vu, remembering a much smaller forge, much simpler tools. A little girl staring at a glowing bar of steel in rural Pennsylvania, while an older man beside her hummed under his breath. The story of this Damascus blade hadn't started here, among plasma furnaces and alien forges. It had started 27 years earlier, in a workshop behind a small earth house. The first time Maya saw the forge, she thought it looked like something out of a history book. Her parents had dropped her off at her Uncle Way's house for the summer. They were quantum engineers working on an Earth Space Administration project, and their next assignment kept them in orbit for 3 months. They didn't want their 8-year-old daughter stuck in a rotating tin can. "Be good for your uncle," her mother had said as she knelt to adjust Maya's backpack straps. "He's a little old-fashioned, but he loves you, and he's very good at what he does." Old-fashioned, it turned out, meant off-grid and completely obsessed with metal. Uncle Way's house sat at the edge of a forest, backed up to farmland. Solar panels lined the roof. A garden sprawled in messy, productive rows. And behind the house stood a long, low building that breathed heat even with the door closed. The morning after she arrived, Maya awoke to the sound of metal striking metal. A rhythmic ping, ping, ping rang through the quiet. Curious, she followed the sound. Inside the workshop, the air shimmered with heat and the smell of hot steel and coal. An orange glow pulsed from a square-mouthed forge. Her uncle stood in front of an anvil, sleeves rolled, hammer in hand. Sparks flew every time the hammer fell. "Uncle Way," Maya called, hovering at the doorway. He looked up. His face was lined and weathered, but his eyes were bright. "Oh, Maya," he said, his voice warm. "Come in, but stay behind a yellow line." A bold safety line had been painted across the concrete floor. "What are you making?" she asked, hugging her arms to herself in the thick heat. "A blade," he answered simply. "Damascus steel. Very special." He turned the glowing metal and struck it again. Each hit was deliberate. No wasted motion. Maya watched, mesmerized. This wasn't like her parents' world of equations and simulations. This was loud, hot, and real. She could smell the burning flux, feel the impact of the hammer through the floor. Over the next few days, curiosity won over shyness. She spent more and more time in the workshop, learning words she'd never heard before. Billet, quench, temper, or slag. One evening, after he'd quenched a piece and they had stepped outside to cool off, they sat on the porch watching fireflies blink in the dark. "Damascus steel is not just a material," Uncle Way said, resting his hands on his knees. "It is a conversation." "A conversation," Maya echoed, "between the smith and the metal." He smiled faintly. "You hit too hard, it complains. Heat too long, it sulks. You listen long enough, you learn what it wants." "Metal doesn't want anything," she said, frowning the way only an 8-year-old could. "No," he agreed. "Not in words, but it behaves. It has tendencies. If you respect those, the blade rewards you." By the end of that first summer, she knew how to hand him tongs without being told. She knew how to fill the quench tank to the right level, how to sweep scale from around the anvil, how to watch the color of steel, and guess if it was too hot or too cold. Where her parents came back from orbit, they barely recognized the more confident, soot-dusted girl waiting for them on the porch. "Can I come back next summer?" Maya had asked, almost before the greeting hugs were finished. Her father glanced at his older brother. "If your uncle is willing." "The forge will be waiting," Uncle Way said. It sounded like both a promise and a challenge. That was the first layer. Every summer added another. More technique, more understanding, more quiet time working side by side. As Maya grew, the forge grew with her, from simple helper tasks to minor blades to full Damascus billets, folded and welded under her own hands. Years later, when humans finally stepped into the wider galaxy, she would step with them carrying something the Union didn't expect, a craft older than most of their databases. That craft was now humming inside the impossible sword in Grawnok's grip. He lowered the blade, eyes still fixed on the flowing pattern. "Human Shan," he said at last. "I do not understand this steel." His voice had lost some of its earlier contempt. "Explain." Maya met his gaze, heat from the forge swirling around her. "I can't explain all of it in one speech, Master Forgemaster," she answered. "But I can show you, if you're willing to learn the way my uncle taught me." Around them, alien apprentices exchanged stunned looks. A human offering to teach the Torian Master Forgemaster. Grawnok's upper pair of arms crossed again, but something in his posture had shifted. Less dismissive, more curious. "Very bold, Human Shan," he said slowly. "Very bold." The narrator's voice slides back in, smooth and inviting. Years rolled by like hammer strokes. During the school year, Maya lived in the world her parents loved, labs, simulations, and orbital news feeds. She excelled in math and chemistry, wrote essays about fusion reactors and FTL drives, and tinkered with small robotics kits. Every summer, she crossed that yellow line in the workshop and stepped into a different universe. One of glowing steel and ringing anvil song. By 12, she could spot bad grain in stock just from how it sounded when you tapped it. By 14, she'd helped her uncle restore an antique sword, learning where to be gentle and where to be ruthless. By 16, she finally forged her own small Damascus knife under Wei's watchful eye. The first time she pulled that little blade from the final etch and saw the ripples appear on the surface, she almost cried. "It's ugly," she said immediately, seeing the uneven waves and patches where the pattern clumped. "It is honest," Uncle Wei corrected. "First pieces always show the truth of the apprentice. The hesitation, the pride, the mistakes." He picked it up, tested the edge, nodded once. "And it cuts," he said. "Function before beauty. Beauty comes later." Her parents noticed how she lit up when she talked about forging. Rather than fight it, they leaned in. "You can combine this," her mother said, sliding a university brochure across the table one evening. "Materials science, metallurgy, structural engineering. Bring your uncle's tradition into the age of quantum drives." Maya took that idea and ran with it. Years later, when the Chin Nakamura fold drive, co-invented by her parents, finally pushed human ships faster than light, the galaxy opened up. The Galactic Union, an ancient consortium of 17 spacefaring species, sent emissaries to Earth. There were diplomatic dinners. Tall, crystalline beings from Aldar streaming light from their bodies. Feathery Seritin floating in graceful arcs. Massive Torians whose gait shook hotel floors. The Union wasn't sure what to make of humans. To them, humanity was a young, chaotic species that had leapt forward faster than their social structures had caught up. Clever but untested, the Forge Academy of Taeti extended one invitation to Earth. Just one. It had been meant as symbolic, the way you offer a seat on a committee to someone whose opinion you don't expect to matter. The Earth Council turned it into a fierce competition. Scores of applicants from every major university, portfolios, and published papers and simulation projects. Maya submitted something different. She sent simulations, sure. She included her doctoral work on phase transformations in high-carbon alloys under extreme pressures. But she also sent recorded footage from Uncle Wei's workshop. The admission board at Taeti watched an elderly human and his niece forging steel in a building with no plasma conduits and no molecular scanners. They saw sparks fly, heard the hammer ring, watched patterns bloom in acid-etched steel. Most laughed. One Aldari on the committee, intrigued, flagged her application. One Seridan advisor argued that primitive hands-on experience might offer unique intuition. The Academy accepted her. She was still replaying the message in disbelief when she called her uncle. "You did it," she blurted, barely waiting for his face to fully resolve on the hollow. "I'm in. They picked me." Wei blinked slowly, taking his time the way he always did. He said at last. "Good. Take family craft with you." "I'll be the only human," Maya said. "The only one at the Forge Academy." "Then listen more than you speak," he replied. But don't forget what you already know. Metal behaves same, human hands or alien hands. The day she arrived at Taeti's orbital forge complex, she almost turned around and went back. The place made Earth's biggest industrial plants look quaint. It was an entire city dedicated to metal. Rings of workshops, testing centers, and energy conduits wrapped around the planet like a shining belt. Inside the student intake hall, her small duffel bag and compact frame looked like mistakes in a room full of towering bodies and glittering forms. Torians dominated the space, their forearms loaded with tools and data slates. Aldari moved like living prisms. Seritin glided on thin air currents, feathers ruffling as they chirped in musical tones. Maya's heart hammered as she approached the registration desk. Name, the Torian clerk grunted. Maya Shan, she answered, palms sweating. The clerk's eyes flicked down at a display, then back to her. Human, he said, as if verifying an unlikely rumor. Forge Academy track, advanced metallurgy. Dormitory 7 Gamma, human adapted chamber. Orientation at second bell. That was it. No fanfare. No welcome party. The first time she walked into a practical forging class, she felt 20 pairs of eyes land on her at once. Grawnok himself led the course. Up close, he was even more intimidating. Scars, sheer size, and the casual certainty of someone who had never had his expertise questioned. Humans are welcome to learn, he had said when they were introduced. I doubt you will find much you can contribute. Our people have perfected the forge arts over millennia. Maya had swallowed her pride. We'll see, she'd replied softly. For 3 months, she kept her head down. She learned to operate plasma forges calibrated to within millions of a degree. She practiced with Torian hammers that weighed more than her whole arm. She watched Aldari manipulate lattice growth in ways that defied anything Earth had modeled. But she also noticed something else. Everything here was perfectly controlled. Temperatures, force profiles, molecular configurations. Every aspect had been systematized, standardized, frozen into executable programs. There was brilliance in that. But there was also a blind spot. Do they ever just hit it and listen? She asked herself one night, staring at the Academy's towering forges through her dorm window. Her chance to test that thought came when Grawnok assigned their first major project. Design and forge a cutting implement optimized for strength, edge retention, and weight. Most students swarmed the programming suites, feeding parameters into automated systems. They let the machines simulate millions of atomic arrangements and spit out the optimal alloy blends. Maya requested something else. Access to a manual forge bay, she told the scheduling AI. Manual? The system asked, clearly confused. Confirm request. Non-automated, non-programmed forge. Heat source with analog control. Confirm, Maya replied. She could feel the shock in the room when Grawnok announced it in class. Human Shan will use the manual bay, he said. For reasons unknown. A ripple of amused chuckles followed. Maybe she's homesick, one Torian muttered. Maybe her species hasn't invented automation yet, another sneered. Maya ignored them. For 2 weeks, she lived in that manual bay. She combined new and old. She used Torian-grade steels, far purer than anything her uncle ever had in his shop. She studied Aldari data on phase states under high gravity. But when it came to forging, she took the steel in her own hands. Hammer, fold, weld, listen. The plasma furnace in the manual bay lacked the fine-grained control of the main ones, but it had something else she'd missed. Smell. The faint tang of hot iron. The sharp whisper when scale cracked off. The feeling of heat on her face. She fell into the rhythm she'd learned as a child, counting hammer strokes, watching colors, listening for that high, clear ring Uncle Wei had called the metal's voice. On the last day, before presentations, she held up the finished blade and turned it under the light. Layers. Thousands of layers. A wave pattern like water seen in a breeze. It's not perfect, she said under her breath, but it was honest. The next day, when Grawnok reached her table and picked up the blade, everything changed. We catch back up to that moment, back to the Grand Forge, back to impossible. After the test confirmed a result no Torian model could explain, Grawnok did something nobody expected. He laughed. The sound was huge, a rolling boulder of noise bouncing off steel walls. Bold words, Maya Shan, he said once the echo faded. Bold blade. His triple-pupiled gaze fixed on her. You have passed this trial. More than passed. Maya inclined her head, keeping her expression neutral. She'd learned that Torian culture saw open gloating as bad form. But, Grawnok continued, true mastery is not simply forging something exceptional. It is understanding deeply enough to teach. He set the Damascus blade down. Can you teach me this Damascus steel? The forge went very still. Students whispered. The idea of a human instructing a Torian master Forgemaster wasn't just unusual. It bordered on scandal. Maya's throat felt suddenly dry. I can try, she said, but the technique is not quick. It took my uncle decades. We begin tomorrow, Grawnok declared, as if that settled it. Private Forge Bay, first bell. And that was how, 3 years in her time at the academy, Maya found herself standing beside a 9-foot alien in a hybrid forge she designed, part traditional hearth, part plasma chamber. He was waiting for her when she arrived. No attendants, no observers. Just the two of them and the heat. I have reviewed your species' records on Damascus steel, Grawnok said without preamble. They read like superstition. Folding, listening to the hammer, trusting feel. Maya hid a smile. By union standards, yes, she admitted. But those superstitions survived centuries because they worked long before humans understood carbon phases or nanostructures. Grawnok crossed his broader arms. I fail to see how ignorance can produce superior alloys. Limitations force creativity, Maya replied, moving to the stack of steel bars she'd requested. When you can't see atoms, you pay closer attention to how the metal behaves. She laid out billets of 2 different steels, one higher carbon, one lower. She explained how contrast in carbon content produced pattern and properties. First, we stack, she said, hands moving with practiced certainty. Layer by layer. Think of it as programming, but in raw form. Grawnok watched closely, his triple pupils contracting as he recorded every detail. Our molecular forges can create thousands of layers in seconds, he pointed out. Yes, Maya agreed, binding the stack with wire. But they make layers uniform. Damascus lives in controlled unpredictability. She slid the billet into the plasma furnace. Heat washed over them. What you call impossible steel comes from non-uniformity. Tiny differences in temperature, hammer force, time at heat. Those random elements create microstructures that spread stress instead of letting it crack. Controlled chaos, Grawnok said slowly. Exactly. When the billet reached forging heat, she nodded. We weld first, she said. You'll do the honors. He stepped forward, taking a hammer that looked almost comically small in his huge hand. Don't brute force it, Maya warned. You need solid, committed hits, but not enough to smear everything into one blob. Think determined, not angry. He snorted. Humans have a talent for metaphor. Metaphor is how my uncle explained what sensors couldn't measure, she answered. Now strike. The first blow rang through the forge. Too heavy. Scale exploded, and the metal skidded slightly on the anvil. Again, she said. But listen. Listen to what? He asked. The note, she said. Each hit has a sound. As the weld takes, it will change. Higher. Tighter. You'll hear it. He frowned, but swung again. Ping. Another. Ping. Then, slightly higher, clearer. Ping. Torian ears twitched. I hear it, he murmured. Good, she said, a little surprised at how quickly he picked it up. That's the steel telling you the weld is closing. When it dulls, it's cooling. Back into the heat. He obeyed, returning the billet to the furnace. They repeated the cycle. Heat. Hammer. Listen. Fold. With 4 arms, Grawnok could move steel in ways no human could. He flipped, twisted, and turned the billet with an efficiency that made Maya's wrists ache just watching. The challenge, for him, wasn't strength. It was restraint. Too much force here, she said, taking the hammer and demonstrating a lighter rhythm. You're crushing the pattern. Into Forge tradition, we prize decisive strikes, he replied. So does Damascus, she said, handing the hammer back. Just not everywhere. Think of it as a conversation, not an interrogation. By the end of the first day, they had a small billet showing the faint beginnings of pattern. It is humbling, Grawnok said as they studied it, to work without molecular view, to rely on sound and feel. It was humbling for me to learn your scanners, Maya countered. I grew up reading color and vibration. Your people read graphs and lattice diagrams. Now we're trading languages. The next days turn into weeks. Word leaked, of course. It was impossible to hide that the Master Forgemaster was spending hours in a manual forge with the Academy's only human. Students whispered. Faculty speculated. The conservative Torian factions grumbled. And farther away, beyond the Academy walls, other eyes started paying attention. One evening, while Maya was reviewing notes in her cavernous dorm room, her friend Zeri fluttered in without knocking. "You've become very popular, Maya of Earth," the Seritan said, feathers shimmering with soft turquoise light. "I'm pretty sure half the Academy wants me to fail," Maya said. "Not what I meant." Zeri hopped up to a perch. "The Metallurgical Consortium has noticed your impossible steel." Maya looked up sharply. "The Consortium? The ones who control most of the Union's starship metal contracts." "The same," Zeri replied. "They sent observers today. Small but important. They watched your Forgemaster's tests." Maya's stomach tightened. "It's just a blade," she said. "A symbol. Damascus steel isn't exactly industrial technology." "That," Zeri said gently, "is precisely why they're nervous. If a primitive human craft can do what their molecular foundries cannot, what else are they overlooking?" Before Maya could respond, her communicator chimed. A small hollow of Grawnok appeared above her desk. "Human Shan," he said, "come to the private forge." Immediately, Zeri's feathers ruffled. "Be careful," she murmured as Maya hurried to the door. When politics smell new metal, nothing stays simple. When Maya reached the private forge, she found Grawnok there, but he wasn't alone. 3 other Torians stood beside him, all wearing the angular insignia of the Metallurgical Consortium. Their posture radiated authority and calculation. "Human Shan," the central one said with a formal nod. "We have heard much about your Damascus steel." Grawnok's arms folded, his tone neutral. "I have been demonstrating certain properties of the human alloy to our colleagues," he said. "They find it interesting." "More than interesting," the consortium representative corrected smoothly. "The stress distribution behavior in this impossible steel suggests potential applications in starship hull bracing, high-impact joints, and more. We are here to explore opportunities." Maya felt suddenly like she was back in Uncle Way's workshop, the first time a collector had tried to buy 3 blades for less than the cost of the metal. "Opportunities," she repeated carefully. "Such as scaling production," another representative said. "Taking this intuitive, hand-forged human steel and translating it into efficient, automated manufacturing protocols. For the good of the Union, of course." She glanced at Grawnok. His expression was unreadable, but his upper hands clenched slightly. "Respectfully," Maya said, choosing each word like a hammer blow, "Damascus steel is not a single formula. It's a process, a relationship between smith and metal. When you remove the human from the loop, you remove a key piece of the behavior. Surely with your human scientific insight and our advanced tools, we can isolate the essential variables," the Central Torian replied. "Then reproduce them." "Maybe," Maya admitted. "Eventually. But if you rush it, you'll end up with something that looks like Damascus but doesn't behave like it. Pretty patterns. Fragile blades." The consortium trio exchanged looks. Grawnok finally stepped in. "This technique is still under academic study," he said, voice firm. "Any commercial application will proceed through the Academy's channels, with full recognition of its human origins." Maya blinked. That sounded protective. "Of course," the representative said tightly. "We simply wish to be first in line when the time comes." Grawnok's triple pupils narrowed. "When and if the time comes," he corrected. After they left, the forge felt quieter. Hotter. Maya wiped suddenly damp palms on her apron. You just blocked them, she said to Grawnok, from grabbing Damascus as a proprietary product. I preserve the integrity of research, he replied. And of tradition. She studied him. I didn't think you believed in tradition, she said. Not the way my uncle does. Grawnok looked down at the still warm billet they had been working on. Working with you has reminded me of certain things, he said slowly. Before molecular programming, my people's forging looked more like yours. My ancestor, 7 generations back, worked by hand. No lattice screens. Only fire and sound. Maya blinked. You never said that. It did not seem relevant, he replied. Now perhaps it does. The Forge Academy of Taeti had seen thousands of visitors over the centuries, politicians, scientists, even Union Council members, but it had never hosted someone like the man stepping off the Earth diplomatic shuttle. He wore simple clothing under his formal robes. His steps were careful but steady. His hands, though aged, bore the unmistakable polish of a lifetime working steel. Uncle Wei Chun, Earth's quiet master smith, the man Maya Shan had once watched hammering steel in a smoky workshop behind a rural home, walked into an alien forge that churned with plasma fire strong enough to melt starship hulls. And he did not look impressed. The human delegation behind him fanned out nervously. Union delegates bowed. Seratin trilled greetings. Aldari emitted soft prisms of light. Torians watched with narrowed eyes, evaluating this small, plain human who had somehow become the center of a political shift. Maya was already waiting at the entrance of the receiving hall, her heart swelling. She hadn't hugged her uncle in years, not physically, not outside a hollow. He spotted her immediately. "Maya girl," he said. Her throat tightened. She ran forward and embraced him, feeling the familiar solidity of him, the grounding presence that had shaped her more than any textbook or simulation ever had. "You made quite a stir," Uncle Wei murmured into her shoulder. "You too," Maya whispered back. Behind them, towering over everyone, stood Forgemaster Grawnok. He stepped closer, casting a shadow that swallowed half the room. "Master Wei Chun," the Torian rumbled, using the formal address reserved only for Academy equals. "Human Shan has spoken much of your craft." Wei bowed slightly. Not deeply, not submissively, simply respectfully. "I hear you wish to learn Damascus steel." Grawnok's triple pupils dilated slightly. "Yes." Wei gestured around the enormous forge hall, brimming with automated forges, plasma conduits, and molecular scanners. "Strange place," he said, "but steel behaves same everywhere." Maya bit back a smile. Grawnok's lower right arm twitched, Torian for unexpected amusement. "The Academy has prepared a forge suited to your methods." Wei nodded once. "Good. Metal doesn't learn through talking." And with that, the two masters walked toward the forge bay, leaving half a dozen species scrambling to follow. The meeting of two masters. The private forge chamber prepared for Uncle Wei remained unused until now, a hybrid design that perplexed even veteran metallurgists. On one side, a traditional Earth-style furnace, brick, vented, analog, fire roaring like a living creature. On the other, Torian plasma arrays, capable of achieving temperatures Earth forges couldn't touch. Between them, an anvil made from Aldari crystalline alloy, nearly indestructible, yet possessing perfect feedback resonance. Wei approached it all with calm curiosity. He ran a hand lightly across the anvil face. "This sings," he noted. "Good. A smith needs song." Grawnok stepped beside him, holding a large Aldari, Torian hammer with 4 grips. Wei gave it one unimpressed glance. "Too heavy. Too loud," he said. "Give me something with balance, not brute force." Without comment, Grawnok produced a second hammer, a human-sized piece crafted specifically for this demonstration. Wei tested it with a few gentle swings. He raised an eyebrow. "Better." Maya watched the exchange with awe. A few months ago, the idea of anyone correcting a Torian Forgemaster had seemed impossible. Now, the Academy stood silent as Grawnok deferred to a human elder with soot permanently embedded in the lines of his hands. "Your niece showed me the acoustic method," Grawnok said. "The steel's pitch shifts as the weld forms." Wei nodded. Good. You listen well. Then he placed the billets on the forge table. Now we begin. There was no formal speech. No ritual. Wei simply lit the fire. In minutes, the furnace roared with heat. The crowd pressed closer. Aldari recorded every photon. Saradin leaned so far forward their feathers shivered. Even the consortium observers, normally poker-faced, looked captivated. Wei held the billet with tongs and slid it into the rising flames. Your plasma forge burns hotter, he said to Grawnok. But heat must not only burn. It must shape. Fire teaches. You listen. Grawnok nodded solemnly. I am ready. Good, Wei said. Bring hammer. 2. The first blows. The billet emerged glowing bright yellow-orange. Wei laid it on the anvil. Weld, he instructed Grawnok. The Torian struck. Ping. The sound rang across the chamber. Wei tilted his head. Too hard. Try again. Grawnok adjusted. His second swing came with measured restraint. Ping I. A different note. Cleaner. Wei smirked. Better. Again. As the Torian forged, Wei moved around him, watching every angle, every hit. It was like watching a martial arts master training a giant student. Feel rebound, Wei said. Let hammer tell you if weld takes. Grawnok struck again, lighter this time. Ping. Wei nodded. There. Here. Steel agrees with you. Maya felt a lump in her throat. For years, she had tried to explain these things in terms academic enough for the Union to accept. Her uncle needed no theory. He simply knew. He always had. After several cycles of heat and hammer, the two worked like men who had been doing this together for decades instead of minutes. Wei flipped the billet one-handed. Grawnok adjusted heat flow with instinctive plasma control. Human tradition. Alien precision. The crowd realized they were witnessing something rare, a blending of two civilizations' heartcraft. 3. The demonstration spread through the academy. As the hours passed, word spread. Students crammed into doorways. Faculty filled the balconies. Even the Union Council delegates abandoned their meetings to watch. The sound of hammer strikes echoed through the halls, rhythmic and ancient, carried through ventilation ducts like drumbeats. One Saratin whispered in awe. It is like watching the birth of a phenomenon. An Aldari beside him replied, light flickering across her crystalline face. This contradicts every model we possess, and yet it is correct. The consortium observers exchanged whispered calculations, clearly trying to quantify what they were seeing. But this was not something that fit neatly into economic forecasts. It was art. It was physics. It was soul. And at the center of it all, two smiths, one human, one alien, worked with growing synchronicity. For the blade that shouldn't exist. By the end of the afternoon, the billet had transformed into something extraordinary. A long, curved blade, neither Torian nor human in style, rested on the anvil, glowing faintly even at rest. Wei inspected it with a critical eye. Pattern will show well, he murmured. Good folds. Good heat. Now we quench. Grawnok carefully lifted the blade with 2 hands. We use your human method? He asked. Yes, Wei nodded. Your sensors can watch. But steel decides. The quench tank shivered with golden oil, a blend designed by Aldari chemists using data from Earth's records. Wei studied the blade's color. Wait. Grawnok froze. The crowd held its breath. Now. The blade plunged in. Whoosh. Flame danced up the sides of the tank. The hiss was sharp and violent. Steam rolled out. The entire chamber glowed with reflected heat. When the blade emerged, the Damascus-like wave shimmered, but not like human Damascus. This pattern moved differently. Scales of Torian geometry combined with the flowing human waves. Ordered chaos. A harmony no species alone could have discovered. 5. Historic analysis. Grawnok held the blade as Academy scanners ran their tests. The readings stunned even the skeptics. Strength exceeds standard Torian alloys by 17%. Fracture propagation nearly 0. Flexibility extraordinary for heterogeneous material. An Aldari metallurgist ran a molecular analysis. The structure includes nanotubular carbon formations, aligned irregularly but advantageously. This should not be possible. Grawnok lifted the blade high. This, he declared, his voice echoing through the entire forge complex, is neither Torian steel nor human Damascus. He looked away. It is our steel. The hall erupted, some in shock, some in applause, some in excited chatter about what this meant for science, diplomacy, and the future of metallurgical research. Maya exhaled shakily. Her uncle rested a hand on her shoulder. "You did good thing," he said softly. "You brought old craft to new sky." 6. Politics shift. After the demonstration, the council delegates flooded the forge with questions. What else can human hand forging teach us? Can this method be expanded? Should humans be elevated in the Union's technological ranking? The consortium's tone turned urgent. We must be allowed to develop this immediately. But Grawnok stepped between them and the blade, for arms crossed. No one takes this knowledge for profit. Not yet. It must be studied, respected, understood. Wei nodded approvingly. Some things must be earned, he said simply. You speak of art, a Torian delegate scoffed. The Union requires efficiency. Wei looked past him, toward the blade, gleaming with cross-species soul. Efficiency is not the only measure, he replied. Sometimes slower path makes stronger steel. Maya felt something shift in the room. A recognition, small but growing, that humans were not just clever newcomers. They carried knowledge the galaxy had forgotten it needed. The program is born. That evening, the Academy Council convened an emergency meeting. Hours later, a decision was announced across all channels. The Forge Academy of Taeti would establish a new discipline, intuitive metallurgy, co-led by Forgemaster Grawnok of Taeti, Master Smith Wei Chun of Earth, Dr. Maya Shan, human metallurgical scientist. The program would study cross-species forging techniques, emergent material behaviors, harmonic craft feedback systems, human acoustic forging, Torian plasma shaping, Aldari lattice alignment. The galaxy had never seen anything like it, and for the first time, humans were not simply students. They were teachers. 8. A quiet moment. Late that night, long after the delegates and students left, Maya found her uncle sitting alone beside the anvil, the newly forged hybrid blade resting in front of him. You okay? She asked softly. He nodded. Good steel, he said. Good day. You've changed this place, she whispered. Wei chuckled. No, metal changed. We only helped it find shape. He stood, placing the hammer Grawnok had crafted for him into her hands. Keep this, he said, for when you teach next generation. Maya blinked. Uncle, I can't. You can, he insisted. Forge carries on. Steel remembers. She held the hammer to her chest, feeling its weight anchor her. Tomorrow, her uncle would return to Earth. But tonight, they stood together, human craft and alien science united in flame and steel. The day after the demonstration, the Forge Academy woke with a different pulse. The vast metallic corridors felt charged, like the aftermath of a storm whose thunder still echoed in distant valleys. Everywhere Maya walked, across the plasma-lit bridges, through the student galleries, past the crystalline Aldari labs, she heard fragments of the same whispered phrase. Impossible steel, human Damascus, intuitive metallurgy. Did you see the pattern? That human elder forged with a Torian master. It spread faster than fire through dry brush. Maya had become something she never expected, the symbol of a shift in how the Galactic Union viewed humanity. And with change came turbulence. 1. Council chambers in uproar. That morning, Maya and Grawnok were called to the Union Council meeting hall, a grand chamber carved into the inner ring of the Academy, its walls shimmering with embedded star maps. Delegates from 11 species were present, and every one of them looked tense. A crystalline Aldari delegate opened the session, her body glowing with fluctuating wavelengths that translated as urgency. The demonstration yesterday, she said, has destabilized several long-standing assumptions within the Union's metallurgical model. A Torian representative from the conservative guild huffed. Destabilized? It embarrassed our predictive frameworks. How does a species with only a few centuries of advanced industry create a material we cannot replicate? Maya inhaled slowly. They weren't questioning Damascus steel. They were questioning humanity's place. An elegant Seritan delegate fluttered her wings and replied, "Perhaps this is not embarrassment, but evolution. The Union has long believed progress is linear, from high technology backward to primitive forms. Humans have shown that some ancient crafts hide essential truths." Another Torian struck the table with his lower fist. Humans should not be elevated prematurely. One blade does not justify reclassifying a species. Maya glanced at Grawnok, but the Forgemaster remained still, quiet, contemplative. The Aldari delegate gestured toward holographic projections of the hybrid Damascus blade. "This blade breaks our models," she said flatly. "It is neither human nor Torian. It represents a third category of metallurgy, emergent structures arising only through interplay between craft intuition and analytical precision." Her crystalline body pulsed a soft violet. "Aldari for awe. We propose," she continued, "that humanity's classification within the Union's knowledge hierarchy be re-evaluated." The room exploded into overlapping voices. "Re-evaluation? Ridiculous. They've barely joined. The science supports it. Humans are not ready. Perhaps they are. This will upset the consortium." Someone shouted directly at Maya. "Explain yourself, Human Shan. Did Earth hide these techniques intentionally?" Maya stood. Her voice was steady. "On Earth," she said, "Damascus steel is not a state secret. Children learn about it in school. Craftspeople preserve it because it matters to us, not as a weapon, but as art, tradition, and discipline." She met each delegate's gaze. "We didn't hide anything. You never thought to ask." The chamber fell silent. Grawnok rose beside her, towering and resonant. "Human Shan speaks truth," he declared. "Our own arrogance prevented us from seeking wisdom in primitive practices. We assumed our technology had surpassed all older forms." He picked up the hybrid blade from its stand. "This steel proves otherwise." The Torian conservative sputtered. "You're siding with humans?" "I am siding with reality," Grawnok thundered. Even the council flinched. At last, the presiding delegate spoke again. "We must deliberate further. For now, the decision is unanimous." A pause. Then, the intuitive metallurgy program is formally recognized as a cross-species discipline. Earth is granted elevated status in craft sciences. A delegation of Union metallurgists will travel to Earth to learn directly from human smiths. Maya nearly sat down from the magnitude of the announcement. Grawnok gave one small nod. Torian for justice served. Behind them, the conservative delegates looked furious. The consortium representatives looked calculating, and Maya felt the weight of something enormous shifting around her. 2. The hammer gift. After the council adjourned, Maya guided Uncle Wei through the Academy Gardens, one of the rare organic spaces on the entire orbital structure. Alien flowers glowed softly in artificial sunlight, their scent mingling with the ozone tang of forge exhaust drifting from distant chimneys. Wei moved slowly, hands clasped behind his back. "Strange garden," he said, "but peaceful." Maya smiled. "Same way you feel about the forges here?" He shrugged. "Fire is fire. Anvil is anvil. Steel is steel. No matter planet." "Uncle," she began, then hesitated. "Do you understand what's happening? The Union wants to learn from Earth. From you." Wei's expression softened. "Old craft lasts because people care enough to learn, whether they have one head or 3 eyes or 4 arms." They reached the ceremonial pavilion, a domed alcove overlooking the curvature of the planet below. Grawnok waited there, holding a long, cloth-wrapped item. "Maya Shan, Master Wei Chun," he greeted. He extended the package toward Wei. "A gift," he said, "for the master who taught the master who taught me." Wei unwrapped the cloth carefully. Inside lay a hammer unlike any earth-forged tool. Its head was Aldari crystal metal, radiant yet solid. The handle was Torian starloy, shaped precisely for human grip. Embedded micro-resonators hummed softly. Wei's eyes widened, the most surprise Maya had seen on his face in years. "This is," he began. "A hammer tuned to your forging method," Grawnok said. It amplifies acoustic feedback. It will help future students hear what you hear. Wei lifted the hammer lightly. So perfectly balanced it felt almost weightless. Good tool, he said simply. Very good. Maya blinked hard to keep her eyes from stinging. This was not just a gift. It was recognition. It was respect. It was the galaxy acknowledging a man who had forged blades on a porch in Pennsylvania as equal to metallurgists who shaped starship skeletons. 3. Saying goodbye. 2 days later, Wei's shuttle back to Earth prepared for departure. Maya walked with him to the bay. They moved slowly, like people who wanted to make a moment last as long as possible. You'll teach them well, Wei said, nodding toward the Academy towers. Humans. Torians. Whoever comes. We'll teach them, Maya corrected. This program needs you. Wei shook his head gently. My place is on Earth. Young hands need guidance. Old ways must stay grounded. But you could stay. And you, he interrupted, must be here. He squeezed her shoulder. This is your forge now. The final boarding announcement echoed. Wei stepped onto the ramp, then looked back. Remember, Maya, he said softly. Steel teaches the smith as much as the smith shapes steel. The doors closed. The shuttle launched. And Maya stood watching until it was only a bright dust swallowed by the stars. 4. New foundations. Over the next weeks, the Forge Academy transformed. A new wing was constructed, its entrance marked by a sculpted representation of 2 hammers, one Torian and one human, crossing over a shared blade. Inside, classrooms blended theory with craft. Plasma forge modules next to analog furnaces. Aldari lattice analyzers beside racks of Earth-style tongs. Torian strength simulators paired with wooden pattern blocks. Students from 6 species enrolled in the first cohort. Some sneered. Some doubted. But once they held steel, real steel, over fire and heard it sing, the skepticism faded. Maya taught with Grawnok at her side. Sometimes he led, demonstrating alien precision control techniques. Sometimes she led, instructing students in the rhythm and sensitivity of Damascus layering. For certain lessons, they played recordings of Wei's workshop, showing Earth apprentices shaping steel with nothing but hammer, flame, and instinct. Craft and science. Chaos and order. Emotion and analysis. Side by side, the new discipline, intuitive metallurgy, began producing results almost immediately. Alloys that shifted flexibility under magnetic fields. Lattice structures that adapted to stress in real time. Materials with pattern strength zones like Damascus, but engineered for starship hulls. Hybrid blades used as ceremonial gifts for interspecies diplomacy. It was more than a program. It was a movement. One that started with a child listening to an old hammer hitting steel in a quiet workshop. 5. The first synthesis is enshrined. Weeks after Wei's departure, the Academy held a quiet ceremony in the Hall of Masters. Grawnok placed the hybrid Damascus Torian blade, now named the first synthesis, into a display case made of stabilized Aldari crystal. The inscription read, "The first synthesis forged by Maya Shan of Earth and Forgemaster Grawnok of Taeti, guided by Maya Shan, a symbol of unity between craft and science, between human intuition and alien precision." Maya stood before it, hands folded, feeling something warm settle in her chest. "This blade changed everything," she whispered. Grawnok nodded beside her. "It is only the beginning." 6. Maya's new path. That night, Maya returned to her quarters and opened the message terminal. She recorded a transmission to her parents, her voice steady but bright. "Mom, Dad, you'll hear soon from the Council. Humanity is being recognized in a new category. And Uncle Wei, he changed the Union. His hammer, his lessons, everything he taught me, they're shaping the galaxy." She held up the little imperfect knife she forged at age 16, the first Damascus she ever made. "I keep understanding this blade more every year," she murmured. "And I think that's the point. Some knowledge grows with you." She ended the recording. Then she placed the knife next to the hammer Wei left her and stood for a moment in silence. Tomorrow, she would teach a class on emergent alloy behavior. Next week, the first Union delegation would arrive on Earth. Next month, she and Grawnok would present their early findings on pattern logic in heterogeneous microstructures. But tonight, she allowed herself to breathe. And in the quiet, she heard it. The echo of a hammer strike. A child's memory. Her uncle's voice. Listen. Maya closed her eyes, smiled, and whispered back. Damascus, my uncle makes it.